You board a plane. You find your seat. You shove your bag overhead, and you barely listen to the safety briefing. You have heard it 100 times. You assume you already know what happens if something goes wrong. But the real answer is far stranger than anything you have imagined. Your body does not experience a plane crash the way movies show it. In most survivable accidents, the entire event, from the first warning to the moment the aircraft stops moving, takes less than 90 seconds. Your brain barely has time to register what is happening before it is already over. So what actually happens to you, physically, in those 90 seconds? First, your body reacts before your mind does. The startle response fires in a fraction of a second, flooding you with adrenaline, tightening your muscles, narrowing your vision. This is useful. It is also, in a real emergency, sometimes catastrophic. Researcher Ed Galea, a fire safety engineer at the University of Greenwich, who has spent decades studying real aircraft evacuations, found something investigators call negative panic. Instead of frantic screaming, many passengers freeze. They sit still. They do nothing. Some passengers in the 1985 British Air Tour's Flight 28M fire at Manchester Airport were found later still fastened into their seats, unmoving, even as smoke filled the cabin. Why would a human being sit still while a plane fills with smoke? Because your brain, under extreme stress, defaults to the most familiar behavior it has. And for most passengers, the most familiar behavior on an airplane is sitting quietly and waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. It is not weakness, it is wiring. Meanwhile, your body is undergoing changes you never feel during a normal flight. Rapid deceleration puts enormous force through your spine and your neck. This is why the brace position exists. It is not a formality. Research from aviation crash investigators shows that folding forward reduces the distance your head travels before it hits something, which lowers the force of the impact by a measurable amount. Passengers who braced in real accidents had significantly better outcomes than passengers who did not. But here is the part almost nobody expects. In most fatal accidents involving fire, the fire itself is rarely the biggest killer. Toxic smoke is. Burning cabin materials release gases that can disorient and incapacitate a person in seconds, long before flames ever reach them. Investigators studying the Manchester fire found that some passengers died from smoke inhalation just feet from an open exit. Their bodies were physically capable of walking out. Their minds, clouded by toxic gas and shock, were not. This is the counterintuitive twist that changes how you should think about survival. The difference between living and dying in a crash is almost never about the crash itself. It is about the 90 seconds that follow it. Aviation researchers have a name for this window. They call it the golden 90 seconds, the average time before a fire fully engulfs a cabin. Flight attendants are trained relentlessly for exactly this window, because they know that a passenger's brain, still catching up to what just happened, needs a loud, clear, external voice to override the freeze response. That is why crew shout the same commands over and over, not because it sounds dramatic, because repetition is what finally breaks through shock. You can see this pattern outside aviation too. In 2009, when U.S. Airways Flight 1549 ditched into the Hudson River, investigators later noted how quickly passengers moved once crew gave firm, repeated commands, compared to how still the cabin was in the seconds right after impact. The plane itself barely mattered in that moment. The voice did. So the real danger was never really about turbulence, or mechanical failure, or fire. It was about what your own brain does to you in an emergency, and whether anyone breaks through it in time. And this is where the story stops being about airplanes at all. Because that same freeze response lives in you right now, in situations that have nothing to do with flying. The moment your phone buzzes with bad news, and you just stare at it. The moment a fire alarm goes off in your building, and everyone around you keeps working, like nothing happened. The moment something goes visibly wrong, and your first instinct is to wait, to see what everyone else does, before you move. That instinct evolved to keep you safe in a world of predators and small dangers. It was never built for a modern world of burning cabins and 90-second windows. Which is exactly why the passengers who survive are so often not the strongest or the calmest people on the plane. They are the ones who had, somewhere in their memory, a single clear instruction. practiced enough times that it could cut through the freeze. That is the actual lesson hidden inside every crash investigation. Not that planes are dangerous. They are, statistically, some of the safest machines you will ever step into. The lesson is that your own mind is often the last obstacle between you and the exit, and the only defense against it is preparation you never think you will need. There is a reason investigators keep circling back to the same detail in survivor interviews. Ask someone who walked away from a serious accident what they remember, and they rarely describe the impact itself. They describe a single instruction: count the rows to the exit, leave your bag behind, get low, under the smoke. Ed Galay's evacuation research found that passengers who had counted the number of rows to their nearest exit before takeoff moved faster and more directly than passengers who had not, even in near-zero visibility. A number in your head, repeated enough times, survives the freeze response even when your eyesight cannot. That single fact quietly rewrites everything you thought a safety briefing was for. It is not there to inform you. It is there to plant one small, repeatable fact deep enough that panic cannot erase it. Investigators studying cabin behavior found something else, too. Passengers who traveled frequently, who had built a kind of muscle memory around airports and boarding and safety cards, were not necessarily calmer in an emergency. Familiarity bred a different problem. It bred autopilot, the same freeze response wearing a different mask. The assumption that because nothing had ever gone wrong before, nothing was going wrong now. Some of the passengers who died closest to open exits at Manchester were seasoned flyers, not nervous first-timers. Experience, it turns out, is not the same thing as preparation. So the next time you board a plane, and the safety briefing starts, and your instinct is to look at your phone instead, remember what is really being rehearsed. It is not really about seatbelts and oxygen masks. It is about buying your future self 90 seconds of clarity. In the one moment your body will try hardest to betray you. You do not need to be an aviation expert to use any of this. You just need one small habit. Count the rows. Notice the nearest exit and the one behind you. In case the nearest one is blocked, say the number to yourself, quietly, the way a pilot runs a checklist before a flight that everyone assumes will be routine. It costs you nothing. Most of the time, you will never need it. But somewhere in that 90-second window, if it ever comes, that one small number might be the only thing left of your mind that is still working.